the little things I love in The Lord of the Rings happens in Rivendell. The Council of Elrond is over, and the decision has been made. They must destroy the ring, somehow, some way. The unknowns are great, but what is known is that 9 will be the number of those who will go with the ring on the epic quest. Of those 9 is Samwise Gamgee, there as servant to Frodo Baggins, the ring bearer. As the chapter The Ring Goes South moves along, we get a list of the others as well and what they are going to be bringing. We are told they take little gear of war, for their hope was in secrecy, not in battle. Aragorn has Andúril, that being the reforged and renamed Narsil, which had cut the ring from Sauron's finger 3,000 years before. Gandalf has his sword Glamdring, acquired in The Hobbit from the Troll Horde. Boromir has a long sword, shield, and his horn. Frodo has Sting and his mithril coat, given to him by Bilbo. The hobbits take the swords gotten at the Barrow Downs. Gimli has his axe. Legolas has his bow. For Sam, the list of possessions is a little more detailed. The full text reads, Sam eased the pack on his shoulders and went over anxiously in his mind all the things that he had stowed in it, wondering if he had forgotten anything. His chief treasure, his cooking gear, and the little box of salt that he always carried and refilled when he could. A good supply of pipeweed, but not near enough, I'll warrant. Flint and tinder, woolen hose, linen, various small belongings of his master's that Frodo had forgotten and Sam had stowed to bring them out in triumph when they were called for. He went through them all. Rope, he muttered. No rope. And only last night you said to yourself, Sam, what about a bit of rope? You'll want it if you haven't got it. Well, I'll want it. I can't get it now. A good list, but hold on a second. Did the narrator just say, I'll warrant? Let's look at the text. Yup, that's what it says. A good supply of pipeweed, but not near enough, I'll warrant. And so the question I have to ask, who is I? Because in its way, it's rather jarring, since it is, as far as I know, the only time in the roughly 500,000 words that make up The Lord of the Rings where the narrator refers to him or herself as I. So who is it? And perhaps more importantly, why is this person making an assessment of how much pipeweed Sam is bringing? Let's take the first part first, as it seems like the easiest. Well, you might say, well, the narrator is obvious. It's Tolkien, because he wrote it, right? Well, yes and no. Yes, it says his name right there on the cover, J.R.R. Tolkien, but that's not entirely true. Not in the great meta sense of the book. Go beyond the cover. Go to the title page. See all those runes? Well, they are translatable. And what they say is, The Lord of the Rings, translated from the Red Book of Westmarch by John Ronald Reuel Tolkien. Herein is set forth the history of the War of the Ring and the return of the king as seen by the hobbits. This actually echoes the runes that appear on the title page of The Hobbit, which translate to The Hobbit, or There and Back Again, being the record of a year's journey made by Bilbo Baggins of Hobbiton, compiled from his memoirs by J.R.R. Tolkien, and published by George Allen and Unwin Limited. So the book, all the books, are therefore not written by Tolkien, they're just translated by him, for us, the modern readers. It's kind of found footage, as it were. So the real question becomes, who wrote what Tolkien translated? Well, The Lord of the Rings gives us the clues, which can be found both at the very beginning and the very end of the book. The very beginning of the book is the prologue, which has information concerning hobbits, about pipeweed, and on the finding of the ring and of Shire Reckoning. From that section, we get this. The original Red Book has not been preserved, but many copies were made, especially of the first volume, for the use of the descendants of the children of Master Samwise. The most important copy, however, has a different history. It was kept at Great Smeals, but it was written in Gondor, probably at the request of the great-grandson of Peregrine, and completed in Shire Reckoning 1592, 4th Age 172. Its southern scribe appended this note: Fingal, King's writer, finished this work in 4th Age 172. It is an exact copy in all details of the Thane's book in Minas Tirith. That book was a copy, made at the request of King Elisar, of the Red Book of the Perianath, and was brought to him by the Thane Peregrine when he retired to Gondor in 4th Age 64. That's at the very beginning. At the very end, we get... In the next day or two, Frodo went through his papers and his writings with Sam, and he handed over his keys. There was a big book with plain red leather covers. Its tall pages were now almost filled. At the beginning, there were many leaves covered in Bilbo's thin, wandering hand, but most of it was written in Frodo's firm, flowing script. It was divided into chapters, but chapter 80 was unfinished, and after that, there were some blank leaves. The title page had many titles on it, crossed out one after another, so My Diary, My Unexpected Journey, There and Back Again, and What Happened After. Adventures of Five Hobbits, The Tale of the Great Ring, compiled by Bilbo Baggins from his own observations and the accounts of his friends. What We Did in the War of the Ring. Here, Bilbo's hand ended, and Frodo had written The Downfall of the Lord of the Rings and the Return of the King, as seen by the Little People, being the memoirs of Bilbo and Frodo of the Shire, supplemented by the accounts of their friends and the learning of the wise, together with extracts from books of lore translated by Bilbo in Rivendell. "Why, you have nearly finished it, Mr. Frodo," Sam exclaimed. "Well, you have kept at it, I must say." "I have quite finished, Sam," said Frodo. "The last pages are for you." So, what is it that Tolkien, our translator, has been working from? It's a compilation of the work of several authors, specifically Bilbo and Frodo, but also Sam and others, and Fingal, King's writer. All right then, it's multiple authors. And you can have lots of fun trying to figure out who wrote what bits. Presumably, Frodo wrote a lot of it, but he had to have had interviewed a number of folks to get their points of view, and about everything that happened where he wasn't involved. A good bit of that, actually. Which gets us back to the narrator in the "I'll warrant" comment. Who is I? Well, the usage of the narrator in first person is something that Lord of the Rings does not do. The Hobbit does, but that is written in a very different style, with a very intrusive narrator who stops the narrative to make comments about what a hobbit is, or inserts anachronisms like Bilbo having a clock on his mantelpiece, or Gollum's pale eyes being compared to telescopes. But The Hobbit is a very different kind of book. It was written for children, specifically Tolkien's children, and was published as a children's book. That kind of narrator, doing those kind of narrative things, are fine in such books. Yet here we have The Lord of the Rings, which is a different tone entirely. Well, maybe not entirely, because Tolkien's original impetus to write The Lord of the Rings was as a sequel to The Hobbit, and he called it that for a long time. As the opening chapters progress, there's a definite hobbity feel to them. The Hobbit, of course, being, in the meta sense, a book that Bilbo wrote. And we see that in the, let's call them fun aspects of life in Hobbiton at the outset of Fellowship. Specifically, we have a reference to one of Gandalf's fireworks at Bilbo's birthday party. The dragon passed like an express train. Another modernism, another anachronism, just like we have in The Hobbit. And as the chapters go on, we get a bit more of the fun hobbity stuff. Hobbit songs, mostly Bilbo's, a sentient fox who makes an observation about the hobbits that he sees sleeping in the woods, adventures that are dangerous but not seemingly epically so. As we play the great game of who wrote what, the signs keep leading toward it being Bilbo as the main author of certainly the opening chapters of the trilogy. He would know about the unexpected party. He, of course, leaves, and it's all about Frodo and the others from then on. But during the Council of Elrond, after Frodo tells what happened to them on the way, Bilbo says this: "Not bad. You would have made a good story of it if they hadn't kept on interrupting. I tried to make a few notes, but we shall have to go over it all again together sometime, if I am to write it up. There are whole chapters of stuff before you got here." And so he surely did, those Adventures of Five Hobbits, from his title page, the fifth being Fatty Bulger, by the way. And he kept on with what he could, writing up those chapters of stuff, until the Fellowship left. And that would be where Bilbo's experiences would end, and he would have no knowledge of what happened until someone came back and told him. By then, of course, the ring was destroyed, and the power it had over Bilbo to extend his life was gone, and his age at last caught up with him. The odds of Bilbo being able to undertake so great a task as to write up everything that happened after the Fellowship left Rivendell, pretty slim. Which is why it's Frodo who gets the job done. But let's go back to that eye, the narrator who makes the assessment of how much pipeweed Sam is taking. Of all the writers, or potential writers, of the book, of which Tolkien is but a translator, who would have this kind of knowledge? It is a very Sam-centric moment, this rundown of his gear, and his final moment of clarity about the lack of rope. Yet, why would Sam refer to himself as I, guessing it to be true that he hadn't brought enough pipeweed to suit him? And frankly, why would Frodo do the same? Since the bulk of the book is written by him, and since I is never used by the narrator again, he seems a less likely candidate too. Which then brings us to Findagle, King's Rider, who frankly wouldn't know pipeweed from a hole in the ground. Why should he be making comments about pipeweed and refer to himself as I at the same time? No. The I surely is Bilbo. Now, I suppose you could argue that how could Bilbo know what was in Sam's head? Well, yes, but that's what writers do. They choose the moments in a story to accentuate, that are the most important, and embellish as necessary. And in this case, it's the rope that's important. He gets to that. Sam's lack of it won't pay off until the Taming of Smeagol chapter, which is quite a ways ahead, but it's there. As for the rest, I think Bilbo knew what he was doing. But why is the I still there, though? If the starting point of the whole book was Bilbo's diary and his other writings, which Frodo then took over, why did he leave this completely out of place I? Well, I like to think that Frodo saw it and thought it a taste of the dear old hobbit having intruded into the text, possibly for the last time. And he decided to leave it there as a tribute to his beloved uncle. Sam, taking over the book, surely saw it, thought about it, liked it too, because it was probably true, and he left it as well. Again, another tribute to the dear old hobbit Bilbo. So, all of this is my own personal opinion. I may be someone else. I don't know. But I is there, and it is one of the little things that I love in The Lord of the Rings. Thank you for listening, and have a wonderful day.